Hello guys, Trilly here, and in this guide I'll teach you how and when to utilize your burst as a demon hunter. Bursting properly is very important as it is the most damage you can do in a short period of time and therefore will usually be the best way to force enemy cooldowns or kill them. There are several things to consider when you burst, and I'll try my best to make sure you're able to have the best possible decision making when it comes to popping your burst. Okay, let's get into it and figure out what talents to use. The main talents to keep in mind when you're bursting is Momentum, which I recommend to always use after Nemesis got nerfed to 15-second duration in PvP. Next up is Chaos Blades. You should think of this as a very powerful single target cooldown compared to your other option, which is Fell Barrage. This is the more AoE type of button, but also on a much shorter cooldown than Chaos Blades. Demon Hunter Burst is a lot about momentum, which procs off your Fell Rushes and Vengeful Retreat. You should always try to make sure you have momentum up while bursting. Before we get into specifics and I teach you exactly how to burst, let's get into some examples showing you what the general burst rotation looks like with both specs. Don't worry about actually learning everything in this part, since we'll break it down right after. Here is a standard example of proccing momentum with my Vengeful Retreat before using Fell Barrage to make sure I get the 20% extra damage while bursting. Here is a standard example of popping Chaos Blades and Fell Rushing to keep momentum up, but also reach my target. It is not as easy to always keep up momentum when you use Chaos Blades. And sometimes you end up bursting without momentum up, but if possible, you should always try to keep your momentum up while bursting, of course. As you can see here, I popped all my cooldowns on the mage and I'm right on top of him. I do not want to use Fell Rush or Vengeful Retreat right now because that would make me unable to follow up with Chaos Strike, which is your biggest damage by far while bursting. And as you can see, the damage is still crazy even without the momentum if you get to spam Chaos Strike as the mage just dies right away. One very important thing to note about Demon Hunter Burst is Chaotic Onslaught, the new golden trait for Demon Hunters. You might think it's not a big deal, but it is. When you have Chaos Blades up and Chaotic Onslaught procs, you do absolutely crazy burst, and it is important to prioritize spamming Chaos Strikes for a chance of Chaotic Onslaught to proc. Now that we know about the key talents to burst, let's get into how to set up burst properly. Let's start with setting up Fell Barrage burst. You should think of Fell Barrage as more of an AoE talent and Chaos Blades more of a single target. What you want to do to create the most burst is to make sure you have 5 stacks of Fell Barrage, Fury of the Illidari and Momentum buff up. The best way to set this up is with a stun like Chaos Nova to make sure everyone's standing still, taking full damage from your AoE. Here you can see me Fell Rushing into the warrior and mage, landing a Chaos Nova on both of them. I then use my Fury of the Illidari artifact ability into Vengeful Retreat to activate momentum and also outrange the warrior pommel into Fell Barrage, and then I Fell Blade to get back on top of the mage. You can also set the burst up with your Metamorphosis stun. As you can see, I use my meta here to land a double stun on the Hunter and Paladin, and then follow up with Fury of the Illidari into Vengeful Retreat for momentum buff, and then Fell Barrage. If you do not have a stun, you can also set it up with just Vengeful Retreat, which applies a 70% slow to the enemies. Here I do not have Chaos Nova or Meta Stun ready, so I go ahead and artifact on the ground, follow it up with a Vengeful Retreat to apply a 70% slow, and then I Fel Barrage off. You can also burst with just a Throw Glaive slow on the target, but this is a bit risky as a lot of classes will be able to move out of your burst and avoid a lot of it, but sometimes it could be worth doing. Remember, you can set up your burst with your partner's CC like a Bash, Capacitator Totem, Shadow Fury, etc. Just always try to make sure the enemy is going to be standing still while your burst artifact is on the floor. Moving on to Chaos Blades. The same thing applies with Chaos Blades. You want to make sure you have Fury of the Illidari and Momentum buff up. But with Chaos Blades, like I mentioned earlier, it is not always easy to keep momentum up, and you need to sometimes prioritize getting your Chaos Strikes off for that crazy burst. In this example, I pop my meta on top of the mage to stun him, then I use my artifact and Chaos Blades at the same time into Chaos Strikes. He then blinks, so I Fel Rush after him, which also activates my momentum, and I continue to Chaos Strike. Again, I want to mention how important it is to spam Chaos Strikes when you use Chaos Blades because of the new golden trait Chaotic Onslaught. You also have the chance to proc Inner Demons for some extra Chaos Strike burst, so keep this in mind when you use Chaos Strike, as this is your hardest hitting ability after Artifact Weapon. Another thing to note about burst is that before you set your burst up, having 2 stacks of Bloodlet up will of course add up to your burst damage, but is very situational if you're able to get this up before you burst. So how do you know when you should use this burst? There's a few things to keep in mind for it to be the ideal situation to pop your burst. You should build up max fury so you can spend it all as you're popping your burst cooldowns. CC on the healer, unless you're focusing the healer of course. Make sure your partners are ready to go. Let me show an example of a perfect time to pop your burst. Okay, so here you can see a lot of things going on. Let me break it down. The enemy Shadow Priest just got locked out on Shadow with Solar Beam. The enemy Mage just popped his Icy Veins and Orb on me to go hard. I just landed an Imprison on the enemy healer. A great way to use your offensive cooldowns can be to counter pressure. Instead of going defensive here when the mage pops on me, I decide to pop my meta on him to force him to play defensive because his partners are both unable to help him right now. So instead of me being scared for my life, as you can see, the priest starts casting mind control on me to peel, and the mage is running, negating the Icy Veins orb completely. And I still have all my defensive cooldowns left because of it. So in general, when it comes to burst timing, it will depend a little on what burst spell you're actually speccing. For example, Fel Barrage has a much less of a cooldown than Chaos Blades, so you'd want to use it pretty much on cooldown to generate constant pressure. Whereas when you play with Chaos Blades, you'll want to ensure that you don't get peeled and you're timing your burst with your teammates, basically putting a little more thought into it, but would want to use it often since 2 minutes is a pretty short cooldown as well. And remember, with either Fel Barrage or Chaos Blades, you always want to pair your artifact with these abilities. Okay, that's it for this burst guide. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please remember to press the plus skill button next to the video if you did. Thanks for watching. See you guys.